Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, well, that's one thing we're gonna talk about. Hello, dear. Okay, thank you. Just gotta keep warm now. Can everybody hear me okay? Excellent. So lonely out there by yourself. So I would like to welcome everybody to the April the 22nd regularly scheduled mid-monthly meeting for the town council. It's a tongue twister there. Thank you all for coming. So we've got quite a few in the audience, some here by choice, some probably not by choice. But it's always good to see those smiling faces behind the masks, right? At least I'm gonna think they're smiling. Without further ado, Kim, if you'll please call the roll.
Mr. Owens.
Here.
Mr. Anderson.
Present.
Ms. Pillion.
Present.
Ms. Quetch.
Here.
And Mayor Webb.
Here. All right, so that brings us to the approval of the agenda, and we do have one change we'd like to make. I think all the council's aware of it. We are gonna include a closed session if the council chooses to do so, to discuss a couple of different things. Would anybody like to make that motion, or I would entertain a motion?
I'll make the motion that we go into closed session to discuss.
3 separate things. Do we need to read those, Cam, ahead of time?
Motion to amend to include 2 closed sessions regarding the pending cases of Eisenhower versus Town of Abingdon, Kelly versus Town of Abingdon, and Reichler versus Town of Abingdon, and a contract with the Abingdon Main Street for discussion of the terms and scope of the contract.
All right, so we have a motion to amend the agenda and include this closed session we just talked about. Do I have a second?
Second.
So motion by Mr. Owens, second by Vice Mayor Quetch.
And Mayor, just to clarify, that would be
Sure.
under M for closed
Oh,
session, right?
Yes, so that will be under item M for closed session during the meeting. Any discussion, council, about that? I'm hearing none. Kim, if you'll please call the roll.
Mr. Owens.
Aye.
Mr. Anderson.
Aye.
Ms. Pillion.
Aye.
Ms. Quetch.
Aye.
And Mayor Webb.
Aye. That brings us to public comments. It doesn't look like we have anybody signed up today. No petitions or public hearings, no proclamations today, but we do.
Mayor, I think we ought to also, that was the motion to amend. I think we should accept the agenda as
Oh.
amended.
So, good, yeah, good call, Cam. Thanks for slowing me down, man. Yeah, good call.
Prove my existence for today.
That's it, you earned your work. So we did approve the motion to amend the agenda, but now I would entertain a motion to approve the rest of the agenda as it is,
As
I'll make
amended.
that motion.
as amended.
As amended. I'll second.
All right, motion by Vice Mayor Quetch, second by Ms. Pillion. Any discussion, council? Hearing none, Kim, if you'll please call the roll.
Mr. Owens.
Aye.
Mr. Anderson.
Aye.
Ms. Pillion.
Aye.
Ms. Quetch.
Aye.
And Mayor Webb.
Aye. Thank you all for bearing with me there. And again, we didn't have any public comments signed up, petitions or public hearings or proclamations. That brings us to new business. We do have some, and I'll invite up Mr. John Dew for discussion regarding requested easement for Appalachian Electric Power to cross the Virginia Creeper Trail right-of-way.
All right, good afternoon, Mayor, members of council, distinguished counselor. Here to discuss a request or possibility of having an easement granted to AP to run an overground or overhead, power extension to a property owner along the Creeper Trail just south of Alvarado. It's a property owner that approached us several months ago, and we told them that have to work through AP. AP requires an easement from the property owner, which in this case is both the town of Abingdon and the town of Damascus. They have, AP has forwarded us an easement document similar to what we've seen before. I think you may have it in front of you in the packet, the easement document. It has been reviewed by Cam. And if there's any discussion, questions about it, it's pretty straightforward, just power extension to a property out there south of Alvarado.
Go ahead.
Does the town of Damascus get involved with us on that, or how does that?
Not with us. They have, the AEP is going directly to the town of Damascus for the similar easement document for the crossing as well.
Will that, how will they block how long will they block the trail? Did they say what their plans are?
It'll either be no or minimum blockage,
Okay.
just because all they have to do is run the line across. They already have poles,
Okay.
poles installed, and just be able to run the line across and put it up to the pole. So it should be minimal, if any.
So no real need to notify the community or anybody that would be.
I don't think so in this
Okay.
case. I mean, AEP employees would have staff out there to stop traffic if they need to. But it's a pretty basic, I mean, it's just basically an overhead service connection to the property.
All right. So what, Cam, where do we go from here? Is this just a basic, we're giving him our grace?
Yeah, I mean, you just want to put it on the agenda for the next regular meeting?
Yeah, I think it was just a discussion. As far as any kind of formal document, do we need an ordinance or a resolution just to grant this?
We have to do a
Easement?
public hearing.
Yeah, I think we have to have a public hearing.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, today was just for discussion purposes.
Okay.
We like to do that before we put it on the agenda for approval or for public hearing, make sure that there was no additional action you wanted us to take before
Sure.
we went forward and did that. So
Okay.
we can direct Kim to go ahead and make sure we set the public hearing, but probably won't be able to do that until then. I just realized that if we have to do a public hearing, we probably won't be able to do that until June then because
Timing.
Time.
because of the
Advertising.
notice requirements. Yeah.
Okay.
But we'll talk about that, John.
Okay.
So do we work in lockstep with Damascus on this? How does?
They've already reached out to us,
Okay.
and I was gonna just let them know. There were a few minor changes, I think, that Mr. Bell had sent back to AEP, and I just was gonna coordinate with them and let them know. I imagine they'll probably send them the same document that we approved.
Okay.
So if
But
we make any changes, they'll probably mirror that.
But it doesn't have to be a joint meeting of council or a joint resolution or anything. It's just
Okay.
we sign it and then they sign it,
Okay.
or vice versa.
Yeah. Well, council, any other questions for Mr. Dew, or, so you feel good about it, John, then?
I do. Again, it is just a simple power extension over to a property. It's nothing fancy about it.
All right. Well, I guess council, you guys okay with, guys and gals okay with putting it on the agenda then, as soon as we can? Okay. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it? Okay. It's possible, well, we might not be able to get in the paper, though. We'll check. Cam thinks it might be a 7-day requirement for the public notice, but we'd still have to check to see if we could get it on the May.
We'll talk.
Yeah, she doesn't.
All right. But I think
Either way, if it
we're
won't be-
okay with going ahead with it, yeah.
All right, we'll move forward.
Kim doesn't have anything to do.
Uh-oh, I'm not getting into that. No resolutions or ordinances for today. I don't think we have any unfinished business, Jimmy, unless you had something?
No,
Okay.
I don't have anything.
And that brings us to miscellaneous business and communication from the town manager. First up, we have a presentation of the town's annual tree report by Mr. Kevin Sigmund, and we've all been looking forward to this for quite some time.
Oh,
Welcome.
You're
Welcome.
looking forward to this.
Always a pleasure.
3 minutes.
3 minutes? All right, all right.
Welcome, welcome.
Somebody play Inagata Davida, how about that? Mayor Webb, members of town council, it's always a pleasure to come and talk to y'all. I will be brief here. I know y'all got a full agenda here. I promised him some things beforehand. I may have to break that promise. Anyway, I do apologize that I did not get a chance to come and talk to y'all last year, but at this time last year, things were a little bit up in the air with the pandemic, and so I did not give a presentation. Just want to catch y'all up on everything that we do have on our plates going on right now. We do have a very busy spring ahead of us with everything we've got going on, as Ms. Pilling can attest to. She is our representative on the tree commission. And I gave y'all, y'all should have a hard copy of that right there in front of you. I apologize. It is a analog copy, but I just put this together here today to make sure we got everything as up to date as possible. The big thing, of course, always, we're able to maintain our Tree City USA status. We have reached 19 years with this, there with the Arbor Day Foundation. I think it is one of our biggest feathers in our cap. And so, even with the pandemic that is going on, we have been able to get concessions on Arbor Day celebrations, because of the pandemic, but we are still able to make all the requirements, to the Arbor Day Foundation and through the state forester to make sure that, we have all those. We still remain the westernmost community in Virginia. As the last I heard was 56 communities in Virginia. We are by far the westernmost. Marion is 1 year behind us. And so, we are continuing with that. Don't want to make y'all aware that we are planning a Arbor Day celebration. This has been a long time in the works. Of course, we normally go to the schools, but what we do have in the works right now is a memorial tree that we want to plant for Dr. French Moore. Down in the Y Park, down on there on the Creeper Trail. We've had to delay this for quite some time. We've finally gotten the okay to go with this, and so we will be planning that. I have already reached out to Mary Ann Moore. She's been out of town for a long time, and we finally talked the other day. She's getting with her family to find out when's a good time. So we don't have a firm date on that. I will make you guys aware of it. Because Dr. Moore served so long on town council, but that is going to be our official Arbor Day celebration, getting that tree planted, and I think we can make a good show for that. Want to make y'all aware of the biggest program that we've got going on right now. This is a replacement of our old Abingdon Tree Initiative. It is called the Abingdon Tree Giveaway Program. Some of y'all may be familiar with it. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to up the ante. We're trying to get more trees out into the public on private property. And so what we're doing, we have gone to various businesses throughout the area here, various nonprofits. We're seeking partnerships with them. And what we do, we've got up to 500 1-gallon size trees on reserve with a nursery in Maryland. Once we get the funding established, once we get everything in, we know exactly what we've got. We're going to get these trees down here. We're going to advertise out to the general public, and there's actually a little bit of information on the second page there for you on this. We will get these trees out to the general public at no cost to them. We'll have some planting and care information for them, and so, but it's going to be up to 3 trees per household, per property right there. And so this is a program that we've been working on. The Tree Commission's been working on all winter, trying to get this going. And this is our pilot program with that. So we're going through a couple of growing pains on it, but we'll learn, and we're going to keep going with this. And I will admit, it's a pure steal from a community in Fredericksburg. They've got an organization up there called Trees Fredericksburg. They've been doing this for several years, and I've gotten the okay to kind of steal this idea from them. They're tickled with that. They even like some of the things we're doing down here with the little cards, the signs that we're going to put on each tree. They like that. I think they're going to steal that from us. And so, but anyway, that's coming up, and you will be seeing and hearing more about that once we start advertising to the general public regarding that. But like I said, we're still getting the funding down, and we will, once we got that, then we'll know exactly how many trees we can give away. So that's going to be a program that's going to be very good. Just to let you know, we've gotten partnerships with Food City, Sustain Abingdon, Abingdon Garden Club, Bartlett Tree Experts, as well as several individuals that have made some good contributions. So we're very grateful for that. We currently have 5 memorial trees slated to be planted in Veterans Memorial Park this year. We've already got 1 in the ground. I got 1 in the other day, and so we're getting these other trees ready to go up there, official memorial trees for Veterans Park. So working on that and getting that going. We're having various tree planting projects going on. One's going to happen tomorrow down on the Creeper Trail. Chris Sullivan with the Virginia Department of Forestry and I are going to be planting some bare root seedlings down there alongside the Creeper Trail there. We're going to try to help build that vegetative buffer there between that and the sports complex right there. So we've got that going. That's going to be happening tomorrow. The trees are already here. I've bought some of the bare root seedlings. Some of the other seedlings are coming as a donation from the Virginia Department of Forestry. So that's going to be a collaborative effort. So we've got that going on. We're changing out some trees over at the Coombs Center, some trees that were there from the initial construction of the property. The trees are just the wrong trees in the wrong place. We're getting the old trees out. We're putting back in right tree in the right place over there. So we've got several on that, and I've been working with Jennifer and Militia on that. We've got that going. Of course, we got the sports complex coming up as well, everything we got going on there with that. And we are trying to get trees back in where we've had to take down trees in other sites throughout the town, especially where we had to remove ash trees. And ash trees, as you guys well know, that we're having to continue to monitor all the ash trees here in town. And I can tell you that we will have to be taking down a bunch more ash trees this year, both on the streets and out on the Creeper Trail, because, you know, I think once everything leaves out this year, we'll really truly see just, you know, how devastating the emerald ash borer has been here in this area. But we're not alone. Every community has had to face that. So that's just one of the things we've just had to work on. I've got, right now, just one upcoming speaking opportunity. The Russell County Master Gardeners has asked that I do a pruning demonstration for them coming up this spring. Haven't heard from Washington County yet. I'm not sure what they're doing with the pandemic, but that's coming up. And I continue my association with the town of Marion. I stay on the board of directors for Trees Virginia, which is the Urban Forest Council. MAC ISA, the Mid-Atlantic chapter of the International Society of Arboriculture, and I remain a big tree hunter with the Virginia Big Tree Program. And of course, anytime a property owner here in town calls in and wants some advice, of course, I always try to bump that up to the top of the list here. So that, in a nutshell, is real quickly everything we got going on. I'm willing to open up to any questions or comments.
I got one quick question.
Yes, sir.
Which just shows my ignorance. How big is a seedling?
I wanted to say that.
The seedlings we're gonna plant down the Creeper Trail,
Yeah.
they're about 18 to 24 inches.
Okay.
They're little bare roots, is what it is.
And they'll be all around that kind of turn.
What we're gonna do is that we're gonna plant in the low areas there. Several areas right in there, we've got some berms, some earthen berms already in place right there where kind of the view is already blocked right there. We're not gonna worry so much about that. We're gonna worry about in the low areas where you can look straight across through there. Now, it's not gonna have an immediate effect right there because, just to, get those in there. If we had to go in and plant big trees, that's a much more labor-intensive thing. So we're going to get in there with standard planting tools and get these things in there. We'll overplant because you always lose some trees. We'll overseed that, so to speak. But those trees, what it is we're trying to plant trees that when they get to be full size, they're going to be the right height. In other words, we're not going to be planting black cherry and poplar trees and large trees, because once they get size, you're going to be able to look right underneath them. The smaller growing trees, the dogwoods, the redwoods, the witch hazel, those kinds of type trees, when they get to be full size, that's going to be the block right there. And having those closer to the trail itself will have a much more direct effect in terms of being a visual barrier. So that's the goal and objective for that.
Great.
Okay?
Any other questions, council? Anything specific? Well, your last talking point there, assisted numerous property owners, I have to, thank you personally.
Okay.
Because there's been, I don't know if you guys have caught on, Kevin, but I certainly have for friends and constituents that have reached out to me, and you're always great to heed that call and assist those property owners, and I do appreciate what you do.
Well, thank you. I truly appreciate the support that I get from town council and the town manager. Because I've said this to town council in years past, not every community that has an urban forester or a town arborist gets that kind of support. And my support here has never been questioned, and I truly do appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Excellent. All right. That brings us to the show for today, the discussion regarding the fiscal year 21-22 budget. I'm sorry. Mr. Steve Trotman, you're on the hot seat.
I'm on the hot seat.
Yeah.
Mayor Webb, Vice Mayor Quitch, honorable council members. This is my first dog and pony show for the annual budget for the beautiful town of Abingdon, of which I am very, very grateful to be a permanent, full-time resident of. As we all know, first of all, before I begin, I want to thank all of the department heads who've been extraordinarily helpful to me so that I can get to know their respective departments. what their needs are, what their wants are, because those are two separate things, as we all know when it comes to budget. I also want to take time to thank specifically the Finance Committee from the council. That process has been very, very helpful for me to make sure that we've gone through, if not every single line, we've gone through pretty much every single line of the budget. And I know y'all have on your own personal time, and for that I'm extraordinarily grateful. As we all know, this past year has been extraordinarily challenging for the entire world, our country, and our town. We're certainly not exempt from everything that we've had to encounter. One of the main things about the pandemic was that, as I wasn't here for it, but when y'all had to pretty much decimate previous budgets because of the pandemic and the uncertainty surrounding that. That really caused a little bit of a problem for this year's budget as well. I am constantly amazed with this town and its business owners and leaders because of the tremendous resilience and ability to adapt to this very challenging and uncertain time. Unlike a lot of other communities that have seen restaurants close, we, on the other hand, are seeing restaurants open, and we're seeing other businesses open. So I really do applaud the Abington business community and the residents as a whole for supporting them, because again, there are many other communities in this state and this country that are not seeing that type of support. But because of the pandemic, as we look forward, despite a lot of emerging improvement that we see, and it's very, very encouraging, I think we can all agree that there's still a tremendous amount of uncertainty. We have increased vaccinations, we're having lower cases of COVID, but then when you read the news, you can see some very devastating and negative news as well. So who knows what to believe, and it's very, very difficult to plan and budget and forecast with that level of uncertainty. So the budget that we put together today to propose to the council for consideration and ultimate consideration for the public as well, is that this is optimistic from the standpoint that we are seeing emerging growth and improvements, but it's also tempered with the reality of the uncertainty that we're still facing. So it's not exactly where we want to be, but at least it's heading in the right direction. There are a number of things that I'll get into a little later that we were not able to put into the budget that are still critically important to the town and its citizens, but we'll get to that in a moment. You'll have to forgive me for not having experience with our monitor here. As we know, the Finance Committee has met a number of times with department heads, as well as the town management, to go through this. You'll be considering the budget today. We'll be moving forward to a public hearing early May, and then in June, adoption of the budget. This is, of course, the 2021-2022 budget. I've already talked about some of the challenges that we've had in forecasting this budget, but again, I think we have before you a realistic view of what we can hopefully see in the next year. Excuse me. One thing that I wanted to bring to your attention as we look at the budget, all the comparable figures are based on the adopted budget for 2021. That budget is being reviewed now for amendment, and we'll be bringing that to the council for your approval for an amended 2021 budget. So all the comparables can be a little misleading right now. So when you see that, like for instance, the general fund is showing an increase in revenue and expenses of 21%, that number is going to drop dramatically because we had the CARES Act funds that were not part of the adopted budget. We've also seen some improvements in meals, lodging, and use taxes. And so that will be reflected in the amended budget. So that gap is going to narrow between the amended budget and the proposed budget for 2022. Any questions about that, the comparable numbers between the two? Some of the assumptions on the general fund. There's been no increase in real estate tax rates. All the other tax rates have remained the same as well. So there's been no adjustment or anything put before the council for voting on that. Meals and lodging continues to improve. We've been very, very pleased to see that, and this budget reflects ongoing improvement. However, we're not forecasting numbers as far back as pre-pandemic. Again, because of the uncertainty, we did factor that in. So we're not going back to 2019 levels and trying to extrapolate growth from there. We may very well see it, certainly hope for, but we would prefer to be conservative at this point with respect to the opportunities for revenue streams going forward. An important note is that this budget does require, all of our budgets have to be balanced, okay? Revenue has to equal the expenses in the budget. However, this budget does require us to dip into the general fund reserves in order to balance the budget because of the expenditures that I'll get into in a little bit. As you know, we have a $5 million general fund reserve floor that we need to maintain. That's not to say that, and that floor is basically to level out cash flow differences, the ebb and flow that we encounter throughout the year. So that $5 million floor may indeed dip below that at some point during the year, but when we end the fiscal year is when we really need to make sure that that floor is being met. And that budget, this budget anticipates being able to meet that compliance requirement. The other thing that this budget has is, based on the recommendations of our financial advisors in the past when we were looking for bond issuance, to maintain a good credit rating for bonds, they suggested that we maintain, in addition to that reserve floor, a budget stabilization fund. The council had discussed that, my understanding, last year and adopted that as a good safeguard to maintain fiscal reliability and responsibility for the future. This budget does include a $250,000 allocation to that stabilization fund. Now the question is a legitimate question to arise. Well, you're putting money into a stabilization fund, but yet you're pulling money out of the reserves. And again, that's to maintain a balanced budget with the expectation that both will be met at the end of the fiscal year. So I want to make clear that this is not a shell game, but I felt it was very, very important to put a line item in the budget for that budget stabilization. That is more of a contingency thing anyway. So if we find ourselves later on in the fiscal year that we need to make some adjustments, candidly, that would probably be one of the areas that we would look at, because that is just putting it from one fund into the other for future fiscal reliability. On the expenditure side, this budget does have some personnel cost increases, but it's being driven primarily by, as you know, the adopted budget this year basically closed the Coombs Recreation Center. Gratefully, we've been able to reopen this year, and that's going to be part of the amended budget, but it's also included in this budget, opened recreation center. The revenue does include additional funds from service fees for the center, but it also does include all of the associated expenses, particularly on the personnel side, because it's heavily driven by personnel costs. One thing also in the personnel side for the budget in the general fund is that our workers' compensation premium, we recently received a notice that our experiential rating went from 1 to 1.19, which in effect is a 19% increase in the workers' compensation premiums. That is factored into this budget as well. We don't know what the exact number is going to be. The town manager and I have a meeting tomorrow with the insurance carrier to go over that. Unfortunately, it didn't happen prior to this. But again, from a conservative perspective, we have budgeted that 19%. The question had been raised about whether or not that premium increase was due to excessive claims. It really isn't. We've had just a few high dollar claims over the past few years, and that's really what has driven that increase. It wasn't because of any type of a trend that needed to be addressed by safety or that type of thing. Any questions thus far on any of that? Please interrupt at any time if anything comes up. Another increase in the general fund is the debt service. Of course, with the bonds, this 2020 bond included refunding of previous bonds, and as a result, we had some principal payments that came due this year, and we'll have those next year as well. So there was a fairly substantial increase in our debt service as we move forward, and that will be the case for the foreseeable future. Unless there's an opportunity for us to yet again refund some of those bond obligations. This budget does not include any additional debt again, because we're dipping into reserves, both on the general fund and the sewer fund. We're not looking to go out to the market, whether it be on a debt or debt financing. Okay.
Could I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any kind of plan as we dip into our $5 million reserve? Do we have any kind of plan where we can increase that $5 million reserve in the future?
I don't think there's a need for that $5 million, Mr. Anderson, because again, that was a floor that had been adopted already. However, that budget stabilization fund, which the council had discussed last year, that is the plan there is to bring that fund to $1.25 million. So between the two of those, we would be $6.25 million in reserves. One with a floor reserve and then the other budget stabilization. So we're moving in that direction. Last year, it was very, very difficult to fund it. We did with a small placeholder. And with the amended budget, we're also looking to, with the increased revenue and the CARES Act money and those type things, we're looking to put $250 in the amended budget for this year as well. But very good question, because it is very, very important that I guess the biggest challenge with the budget stabilization fund last year and this year is the whole purpose behind that type of a fund is to help you when you encounter extraordinary circumstances. Well, we all know we experienced extraordinary circumstances last year. So at the same time that we could have used the fund, we were trying to create the fund. And so that is a challenge. And that's why I'm saying if through this year, if this budget proves to be more optimistic than reality, then that would be one of the things that we would need to look at, because that's really the purpose of it.
And you may have already said this, Steve, but I think, excuse me, when we first discussed this stabilization fund, I think the goal, Donna, wasn't it to do $250 every year for 5 years?
It was.
To have the total 1.25. So that's kind of why we're targeting $250
Right.
a year, was to try to meet that 5 year goal.
And that came from the financial advisors. They felt like for us to have our bond rating where it needed to be when we're borrowing money, we need to have that stabilization fund.
Sure.
Just sort of protection.
Thank you, Steve.
The short answer is yes.
Smart.
Highly unusual for an attorney to use such short answers. I say that as a good neighbor. Also in the expenditures, again, we had to dip into the reserves in order to balance the budget. And one of the reasons is because as with the Meadows, the project that is still under development, the plan, of course, is to have that completed during this next fiscal year. So from the bond funds that we had previously that were put into our SNAP account that we draw down in order to pay the expenditures for the Meadows project. Currently, at the time we wrote the budget, this number changes, but at the time we wrote this budget, there was a little over $6 million in that SNAP account, and we had about $7 million in expenses, forecasted expenses to complete the project, okay? And so that's why we had to pull the general reserve. So at the end of the fiscal year, the bond funds will have already been drawn completely down, and we will have completed the project. So that's in this expenditure line as well. So you'll see this transfer in the expenditures from the general fund over to the capital improvement fund, which is the Meadows and a number of other projects as well. And this is the proposed budget numbers for you to take a look at. You can see that on the general fund, we're at a little over $13 million. And this is what I referenced earlier, where you see this almost 21% increase over the 2021 budget. That number is going to shrink as once the council reviews and adopts the amended budget. Because where we budgeted $10.874 million last year, we had over $1 million in CARES Act money. We've had some increased meals tax and use tax. So again, that number is going to go up. That variance is going to go down.
And just to clarify, increase in meals tax by what we projected.
But exactly.
I just wanted to clarify that for the council, because we are still doing very well recently, but as you recall, we projected a 35% decrease in meals and lodging taxes. Lodging taxes have actually performed a little bit below that, but meals taxes have actually outperformed and actually only been down about, I think, a little bit under 10% of what we had projected.
Exactly, but again, the budget does not equal pre-pandemic levels either. Although there is, based on some of the trends we're seeing with meals and lodging, for that matter, even most recently, I was at the Martha over the weekend and talking to the young lady at the front desk. He said they were booked this past weekend. They were booked solid the weekend before that. So people are coming out of quarantine and they're coming to Abingdon and using the Creeper Trail and visiting the restaurants. So
We're moving in the right direction.
absolutely, we're moving in the right direction. There's no doubt about it. But again, we didn't want to be overly optimistic by going back to 2019 and expect an increase from that level. And this is the combined, all the funds that we have right on this sheet before you right now, both the general fund, the capital improvement fund, the street maintenance fund, and the wastewater or sewer fund. So for this year, the proposed combined budget is 28.6 million. Again, almost $2 million difference between all those four funds. Okay. On the general fund specifically, and I already talked about why it keeps going there. Talked about the assumptions on the general fund. Here we go. I had alluded to this earlier, particularly on the revenue side. There's been no increase in the real estate taxes. It does reflect some improvement in our other local taxes. Doesn't include some of the other grant money that we get, not VDOT, because that is a change. And I want to highlight on here that the intergovernmental funds, in the past, VDOT money was split between, well, I shouldn't say too far in the past, because
Just
the
last
street
year.
maintenance fund was just this past budget, okay? But the budget for 2021 split VDOT funds between the general fund and the street maintenance fund. And we're gonna amend that, okay? So you'll see that in the amendment, because on this budget, my preference and concurrence with the town manager and the finance committee as well, was that it's best to go ahead and segregate that money up front when it's received. So when the money comes in from VDOT, it's gonna go straight into the street maintenance fund and not half here and half there, okay? So it's all gonna go into the street maintenance fund. So that's why you're gonna see a difference between the adopted budget and this year, because we have moved that money out of the general fund, okay? We recover cost from VDOT, and that's reflected as a cost recovery line. And again, it's not really a shell game, but it does allow us to more accurately track general fund overhead that needs to be allocated to VDOT eligible street maintenance.
I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna dumb it down a little bit. Can I try to do that for the non-financial people? Because explain it to, because even people like me, because if you didn't know, if you weren't in the weeds like I was, I would. So basically what we're trying to say is, there are costs that are incurred by like the street department, the public works department, that we can utilize these VDOT funds for. So when there are labor costs, there are improvements like the curb and gutter and those types of things, any improvements done in VDOT approved roads or streets, or we can utilize those for. So instead of splitting them up, which we originally did, which we've kind of reconsidered that, and sort of we have a new finance director too, we decided it's cleaner just to go ahead and put it all in the street maintenance fund, and then as John and his staff do the calculations and determine how much money we can utilize from those VDOT funds that are eligible for those revenue sharings that we get from VDOT, then it will be a cost recovery, is the term that Steve uses, from the street maintenance fund to the general fund to basically pay back those expenses that were incurred in the general fund for labor improvements and whatnot. So is that?
Exactly.
I was
Exactly.
trying to explain it a little bit in a different way.
No, I
Yeah,
appreciate the
so-
clarification. And I've worked with John Dew and spoken to him at length about that process. And I think we're both in agreement, John, that that would probably be the cleanest way. Again, because the way it is now, you've got half the revenue here, half the revenue over there, but the costs are gonna come from here, but we have to pull some costs from over there.
And before, remember, before we had the street maintenance fund, all of them were commingled
Everything was
in the
commingled.
general fund, and so it made it very difficult
Yeah.
for John Dew to manage his budget, because unless he was internally tracking that and we were segregating it from the general fund, that was the whole, the idea and the concept behind establishing the street maintenance fund. So
Yeah. And
it's really for the benefit of some of the new council members and maybe anybody new in the public who's listening, that why we did that. It was last year, and that's why we did it that way. So.
And also from being able to monitor our general fund balance, because we had half of the money from VDOT and the general fund balance, it was actually being reflected, it was overstated, because that money's restricted.
Right.
And it really needs to be over here. And so throughout the year, I didn't wanna have to figure out, oh, well, I need to take that out to figure out what my general fund balance is. It
Like,
just-
oh, look at our balance, our general fund balance is really healthy. It's, yeah, but, $800,000 that are restricted VDOT funds, so we wanted to separate those. Yeah.
So, anyway, any questions on the revenue portion? Again, I think everyone's in agreement, it's a fairly conservative approach, but, next on the expenditure line, again, I alluded to this earlier about the personnel costs. This is the general fund across all departments, okay? It does include that workers' comp increase. This is not pre-pandemic levels of salary, wages, benefits, and that line includes everything: salaries, wages, full-time, part-time, payroll taxes, benefits, VRS, retirement, workers' comp, state unemployment tax. So it's all there across all departments. And again, that comparable variance number is gonna shrink as we amend the current budget, specifically because we've opened up Coombs and we've rehired a number of people there. So our expenses this year on the salary side are gonna go up as well. This is a synopsis of the 270 pages that follow in your pack. I tried to bring it all up into bite-sized pieces, if you will. And so I separated it into personnel, operating, and maintenance costs. And again, this is across all departments within the general fund.
And still reflection of the non-amended budget numbers.
The non-amended budget, right. So when I come before you in May, we'll have the amended budget for you to consider at that point in time. And then that should be adopted,
First meeting in June.
first meeting in June, which would be the, so I'll be able to show you more of those unless you change this proposed budget, these numbers will remain the same. It'll just be the comparables and the previous, if that makes sense, okay? Again, this is, includes the allocation from the general fund to the capital improvement fund to finalize the construction of the meadows. Okay. Any questions? Am I going too fast or not covering enough here? It's good. Okay, the proposed non-departmentals. This was a difficult area. Again, this is really a result of the continued uncertainty, the fact that we are having to dip into our reserves in order to not just maintain operational expenses, but also the capital improvement side of the expenses as well. So with the exception of a few basically governmental type non-departmentals that we have, the Washington County Library, the
Housing Authority.
Housing Authority, things like that. That's really the only thing that's been budgeted. That's where we are right now on the non-departmental. We'd certainly like to be able to change that, and perhaps as things improve over time, it could be revisited. But right now, having to dig into reserves, it just wasn't fiscally prudent approach right now. Sewer fund operations. Here again, let me get to there. On the revenue side, this does include, last year, my understanding is that the council had considered or been presented with a rate proposal for an increase over time. And because of the circumstances last year, that was deferred, okay? And it was 4% was suggested last year. This budget does include a 4% service, residential commercial service fee increase for average residential user, $1.50 a month, something like that, so.
Steve, you might want to advance the slide to the series. That's
My
okay.
apologies.
That's all right. There we go.
And actually, I think this was backwards because I had that on the assumptions. So this does include the 4%. The previous year's budget had some loan proceeds because I think there had been some discussion about some capital improvements within the sewer fund that would be funded by financing. We didn't go out for any of that additional financing, and most of the sewer fund capital improvements weren't done either. So this budget has kind of shifted around. Now we're going to use sewer fund reserves so that we don't have to go out to the market for debt financing right now. So as I mentioned before, nowhere in here is there additional debt financing. That's not to say that we can't change our mind halfway through the year, and as opposed to using reserve funds, we can go to the market. But the sewer fund did have adequate reserves to address the capital improvement needs that the sewer fund. And again, for the benefit of the council, the sewer fund itself is a proprietary fund. It is completely separate, operates separately from the general fund. The accounting for it is different than it is on the general fund. The accounting for the proprietary fund is much more GAAP type accounting for a for-profit business. It's on an accrual basis and things of that nature. So that's why it's separated completely. My understanding is about 5 years ago or so, the decision was made to start allocating some of the general fund expenses to the sewer fund. Why? Because all of the town employees are in the general fund, with the exception of those who are specifically working in the sewer department. But yet, there's town manager, there's administration, there are other people, other employees in the general fund side, if you will, that do contribute to the operation of the sewer fund. So there's an allocation of salaries, and that's all reflected. That salary line that I discussed earlier for the general fund, that's just the general fund. Sewer is sewer plus any allocated personnel cost, okay? We're gonna be taking a closer look at other expenses that in the past are sewer expenses but had been absorbed by the general fund. So we're gonna be taking a close look at that to make sure that those costs are adequately allocated amongst the two funds. Okay. Let's see. As I mentioned, on the expenditure side, the capital outlay is gonna be funded by the reserves. Capital improvement. Again, this was last year as well,
Yeah,
wasn't
last
it?
year as well. This one and the street maintenance fund
Yeah.
were added. Yeah.
This was, in the past, every department had their own capital outlay line item in the budget. Very wise decision last year to set up a separate capital improvement fund. And also, we've consolidated all of our debt service for general fund related, all of our debt services in one area. It used to be in different departments as well, but we've consolidated that. It's a lot easier to see what the total debt service is for the town. And this allows us to look at what our real capital improvement needs are for the town. This does not include the sewer. Again, the sewer is separate, and it addresses its own needs. With respect to the capital improvement on the revenue side, as I mentioned before, all the funds that are remaining from the bond issuance that are currently being held in our SNAP account, all that money will be drawn down to cover the expenses for this fiscal year, because the expectation is that project will be completed, okay? It also requires, on the revenue side, funding from the general fund, which is why we pulled it out of reserves, so that we can pull it into the capital improvement to make sure that the Meadows is completed. And on the expenditure side, in addition to the Meadows, we have the Fields Penthouse. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done on that. The expectation is that that property will be able to be brought, completed and brought online, so that we can actually start using that property, either to house town employees or something else, whether it be tourism. It's a beautiful property, as we all know, and it's centrally located, and we'll all be very pleased to see that completed. So that is in the CIP on the expenditure side. Now, the disappointing side, of course, again, and this is the reality of where we are with the economic growth and within this budget, we did have to defer a great deal of other capital improvements that had been recommended by the different departments. $1.8 million in capital improvements. Now, we could go to the market and have debt financing. I don't think we have an appetite for that right now to do it. And the fact that these capital improvements have been deferred in no way indicates a lack of importance for any of it, okay? It was just truly a matter of prioritizing, and right now we need to bring the Meadows under completion. We need to get the Fields Penthouse under completion and online so that we can use it. These, however, had to be deferred. And I've listened.
See, there was a slide, I think, that we had on the deferred costs, and I guess it was a couple forward. There we go.
Here we go. Right.
Okay,
This
thanks.
is the listing.
Yeah.
And again, this is in no way to diminish the importance of any of these things. Starting with the police department, the 4 vehicles that they had requested. This had been on their list in the previous year as well, and it had to be deferred. And unfortunately, had to be deferred yet again. The street department had a number of different projects on their list that we just had to again put on the back burner. An automated trash truck. Hope we can keep that one going, John. That we have. Otherwise we'll use. I was gonna say we'll use John's pickup truck and drive around the neighborhood. If you can start.
Well, and just so everybody knows, it's not like that's not, it's just, there comes a point where there is diminishing returns where we're putting too much money into maintenance of the vehicle, so just want everybody to know, it's still operational. If you see it in the neighborhood, it's still picking up trash.
Also becomes more difficult to get parts.
That's true, yeah.
We'll hang in there.
On the facility maintenance, there are a number of general repairs and updates on town-owned properties, not, also including, the town hall here. the creeper trail area, you know, all the things that the facility maintenance group maintains. I personally feel that area is very, very important. I've talked to a number of the council members about that, that, you know, Abington's charm and Abington's existence is because of the beautiful architecture, because of the creeper trail, because of the restaurants and all of that. And we want it to be as fresh and inviting as it possibly can be. And, you know, it's important, but again, we just had to prioritize right now. Parks and Grounds, John and I have talked about this quite a bit, on the Virginia Creeper Trail trestle repairs. That's very important that we take a look at that and budget adequately for that. I've shared with a couple of folks, if we're ever gonna have another fund, I really do think we should investigate having a Virginia Creeper Trail fund, because the repairs and maintenance that we need right now are pretty expensive, but the ongoing maintenance that's required, pay me now or pay me later. I think, John, on that report, it was like 5 years, 10 years, and 20 years to anticipate major repairs. We can't wait until it happens and then wonder where we're gonna come up with the money. So I think as our budget improves and the economy improves, I would propose next year when I come before you, that we start adding a line item for the Virginia Creeper Trails, ongoing maintenance and upkeep for those large expenditures that are gonna be coming down the pipe. The Coombs Recreation Center, sorry, Jennifer, they had a boiler. We have to defer that. She's assured me that they can continue to keep that boiler running with Band-Aids and chewing gum. And so in the meantime, we'll try to keep that pool heated. But
Well, basically have an insurance policy. If something were to go wrong, I think the expense would be $6,000 or something in around that neighborhood. So we felt like, well, worst case scenario, if something does happen, that's the outlay that we would have to
Right.
make in order to do it. So just trying to roll the dice.
yeah. Here on the street maintenance fund, this is fairly simple. The street maintenance fund was created, again, to segregate those VDOT monies that we receive for urban street maintenance. John's department takes care of all of that. This is separate from town streets. These are VDOT eligible streets only. So that money that comes in is obviously restricted. The Park Street project is, hopefully will be completed this year, hopefully? Next fiscal year, yeah. When I say this year, I'm talking about this one.
Correct.
So, but the VDOT funds there, we still have to contribute about 2%, and so the general fund is gonna, put some money over there for that as well. But that's all the revenue side on the street maintenance fund. As Jimmy was able, or the town manager was able to clarify, part of that money can be allocated to overhead for our own employees. And that overhead is wages, benefits, leased vehicles, gas.
And I
road
believe,
salt.
correct me if I'm wrong, John, but we could also use equipment use, don't we? Do we incorporate that, the VDOT equipment use rate as well? Okay.
Labor, equipment, materials,
Yeah.
consulting,
Right, so,
contractor costs.
so we'll look for all of those areas that we can use. And again, going back to the revenue side on the general fund, we put in a placeholder of $625,000 in recovered costs. That's recovered costs from VDOT funds, okay? And again, we don't know from year to year exactly what that number is, so we put 625 in as a placeholder. That could go up or down depending on the level of activity through the year. But I think that'll allow us to really have a cleaner look at what the expenses actually are. And I'd already addressed all the VDOT money is being deposited and recorded and segregated into the VDOT street maintenance fund. And again, straightforward revenue for that, and just as straightforward on the expense side for that fund. And with that,
No, we want more.
I'll be happy to entertain any questions. I hope this has given you a fairly concise view of what the town budget is being proposed for next fiscal year.
Steve, this is my first experience with the budgets, and
Me and you both.
yeah, and you know, I've been trying to digest all this, and I think you and the finance committee and department heads have done a great job with coming up with a budget for us, and so I thank you for that.
Well, thank you very much. It has been, surprisingly enough, it's been a very enjoyable experience. You know, it's not often that you get to come on board with a new entity, particularly my first foray into local government, and my first order of business is to start on the annual budget. But it afforded me the opportunity to meet all the department heads and others and really develop a good working relationship with these folks. I have to say, and I say this as a resident as much as an employee, this town is blessed with the folks that you have here running the various departments. It really is a remarkable group, and I'm very proud to work with each of them and very happy to work with y'all as well.
Thank you.
My go-to mantra is, I don't know what I don't know, and so I don't know a lot, evidently, but I'm learning.
I want to compliment Steve. He came here on December 28th, and in that period of time between December 28th and up until last week, the fact that he was able to do this, and I didn't have to do the presentation this year, which was great. It's just amazing, and I just want to compliment him, and I know the staff has a lot to do with that, but I mean, him and I had a lot of meetings, but I was just so confident that when we met, he was picking up, every week he was picking up something that, and once he got it, and I just wanted to compliment Steve on the job well done.
Well, thank you again, and again, it's not one person by all means, it's all the department heads that helped me.
As Mr. Trotman said, he's my neighbor, and I will say from firsthand experience, he's doing his part to stimulate the Abingdon economy. And, he and his wife Debbie trying to make my yard look really bad. So.
Have a great neighbor. Thank you all.
And, you know, council, I had, Donna and I, of course, being on finance committee, have spent lots of time with Steve, and I would like to say thank you again. You've done a great job. The employees absolutely have all worked together very well this year. During the whole process, I haven't heard any, honestly, I haven't heard any complaining at all. You stepped in at a very challenging time during a pandemic year, trying to do budgeting with limited resources. But again, I want to reiterate what you said. Even in difficult times, it's great to be an Abingdonian. We are very fortunate to have the opportunities we have. The tax revenue we have, the employees we have. And we serve with a great council, we really do. The last thing I would like to say is if any of the council, Mike brought up a great point, if you have any questions at all, please schedule a meeting with Steve. He will go through it with you in any kind of detail you'd like, and does a great job explaining things. So please use that as a resource as well.
Yeah, and just for some of the council members who are new, there will be a budget ordinance that we will present at the next meeting for a first reading, and there will be a public hearing. The budget ordinance is essentially a categorical ordinance that's required by statute, and a lot of these expenditures will be combined, and you will see categorical. You'll see categories that say, you know, governmental operations and such. So it'll look different than the actual working budget that you've seen, that we've presented. Did you want to jump in?
Yeah. What we sent out last Friday on the first section of that is the actual ordinance categorical layout.
You mean the draft public notice, you mean?
Yeah, and that was part of the budget.
Part of the package.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right, it was. Yes,
Yeah.
correct. Yes, you're right.
Yep.
So the ad was based off of that. So that basically is taking all of those various departments that we have in the budget and combining those and putting them into those categories. But at the meeting that we have on the first meeting in May, we will be using, well, actually, we are going to present a draft of the amended budget at the next meeting for you to review. And we will discuss it further if we need to. And this is the amended budget for this year at the May work session. But what we are going to do is adopt the amended budget. It will be considered in the meeting in June before we adopt the final budget for this upcoming year. So we'll do it in that sequence. And that way, we can properly incorporate the amended figures into our financial documents when we pass the upcoming fiscal year budget. So hopefully I didn't confuse you all with that, but.
Yeah. So just to reiterate, the amended budget for this year is to reflect the increased revenues and of course the increased.
The CARES Act, that was the main reason why, but then,
Yeah.
because of the Coombs Center, if you
Right.
recall, I mean, we had very limited staff budgeted
Right.
in the recreation department. And so since we came back online, those expenditures, knowing that we were going to amend the budget, we started incurring those costs, knowing that we would be revisiting that
Right.
later in the fiscal year.
So we'll amend that before we take action.
Correct,
on new-
yeah, that's what we
Right.
decided, that would be the proper sequence, so.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. Okay, any other questions, council? Okay, that's a very good first fleshing of the budget. We certainly appreciate that. That moves us to council member reports. Do I have anybody that has anything today?
I have one.
Okay, sure, Vice Mayor question.
I joined the Abingdon Town Council in the summer of 2018. Knowing that I was approaching retirement, I decided that I might have something to offer the town that I love from my 43 years of small business experience on Main Street. In considering the decision to run, I received much support from friends and customers. I must admit that some of the people I sought advice from asked me if I was crazy. Between the time I was elected and the day I was seated, our then town manager of many years resigned his position. For a period, our police chief served as our town manager, and after that, council hired an interim town manager while we conducted a search for a permanent town manager. I remain thankful for both for their service to Abingdon. In May 2019, after a search assisted by the consulting group, the Berkeley Group, Jimmy Morani took over as our new town manager. Since the town manager serves at the pleasure of the mayor and the town council, we all got to know him rather quickly. I speak for myself when I say I was soon made comfortable by our hire of Mr. Morani. Nobody's perfect, but he seemed to have the town's best interest in mind, conducted himself professionally, and communicated openly and effectively with council. Jimmy was hired by and serves at the pleasure of the duly elected town council. As one member of council, I see it as my responsibility to support the town manager whenever I can and to correct him when I must. My duty is to the residents of Abingdon first and the town manager second. Because of many pre-existing issues, the first 2 years of Mr. Morani's tenure as town manager have been busy, but I can say with confidence that he has always had my support. In the face of resistance from some employees because he was the new town manager, a global pandemic, and its obvious social, budgetary, and operational challenges, he has held up well. On the challenge of establishing a culture deserving of our town, he has made changes that meet my approval. On matters such as dealing with the few isolated complaints from the community, I support him. He has done a good job for the town, and I have come to know him as professional, hardworking, compassionate, and honest, and he still communicates effectively with council. Now, if he's got one outstanding deficiency, I'd say it's 'cause he ain't from around here. Something my husband, who moved here in 1984 from inside the Washington Beltway, knows something about. But on that, I plan to extend some grace and I hope the residents of Abingdon will too. Thank you, I appreciate you.
Thank you, Donna, and thank you, Jim.
Sure. All right, very well spoken.
I agree with everything Donna said.
Thank you. And I would have to agree, you know, it's been certainly been a challenging past couple of years. Jimmy, you did not come into an easy situation, and you have handled the situations you've had to deal with very tactfully. You know, I do think we're in a great place as a town. As I said before, we've got great employees, and certainly we've certainly prevailed and done well through a pandemic. You know, I have to resonate the same feelings, so thank you for your hard work, Jimmy. If no other council member reports, that will move us to the closed session. And I do have a motion, if Dr. Owens, if you don't mind to read that for us.
I move that the Abingdon Town Council convene in closed session pursuant to the Code of Virginia 1950 as amended Section 2.2-3711A7, consultation with legal counsel regarding pending cases of Eisenhower versus Town of Abingdon, Kelly versus Town of Abingdon, and Reichler versus Town of Abingdon, and as permitted by Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A29 concerning a contract with Abingdon Main Street for discussion of the terms or scope of the contract because public discussion would adversely affect our bargaining position or negotiating strategy.
Have a motion by Mr. Owens. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Vice Mayor Quetch. Council, any questions? Any discussion? Kim, if you'll please call the roll.
Mr. Owens?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Ms. Gillian?
Aye.
Ms. Quetch?
Aye.
And Mayor Webb?
Aye. And are we gonna stay in?
Yeah,
here?
we're gonna stay in here.
Okay.
Donna's gonna be
So-
ready to give me
Can we give her a stipend? Can we give her an additional
I
stipend?
got the bump
Donna,
deal.
we're gonna give her an additional stipend for doing all this.
Well, okay, that's a good idea.
I did get the bum deal here.
That was a joke.
All right.
Now, she really has.
I know.
So we just need to come back into open session, and there's nothing else to do.
You really did. Think about it.
Come back into open session. Open session.
Oh, I've done it about 2 weeks. It's
So
doing
I would entertain a motion to come back into open session.
Read this now.
Not yet. I would entertain a motion to come back into open session.
I'll make a motion that we come back to open session.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Owens to come back into open session, second by Vice Mayor Quetch. Any discussion, council? Hearing none, Kim, if you'll please call the roll.
Mr. Owens,
Aye.
Mr. Anderson.
Aye.
Ms. Pillion.
Aye.
Ms. Quetch.
Aye.
And Mayor Webb.
Aye. And now for the certification.
I move that the town council certify that in closed session just concluded, nothing was discussed except the matter or matters specifically identified in the motion to convene in closed session and lawfully permitted to be discussed under the provision of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act cited in that motion.
Mr. Owens, do you so certify?
I so certify.
Mr. Anderson.
so certify.
Ms. Pillion.
I so certify.
Ms. Quetch.
I so certify.
And Mayor Webb.
I so certify. I think that brings us to the end of the agenda. Is there anything we're missing, council? Anybody? Speak or forever hold your peace? All right, meeting is adjourned.
Said 22 hours.
Long-